Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we're test driving the 2023 Mercedes-AMG C43, the base model of the mid-level of the high-performance, more expensive version of the C-Class. It's complicated, folks, but I'm going to try to straighten it out for you. We're going to have a good look at it inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Okay, so let's talk about the vehicle we have here before us. This is the 2023 Mercedes-AMG C43, the base model of the AMG line of C-Class models. And you can get more powerful engines in this, vastly more powerful engines. But here we're starting out at a pretty good place. And we'll talk about the engine more specifically in a moment. But looking at the vehicle we've got here, this has a lot of options on it. $72,000 as tested. I know some of you are probably dropping your jaw, but a lot of that is options. And the first one I'd point out is this beautiful shimmering pearl white paint. $1,750 for pearl white. The Germans really like to get you when it comes to option pricing. But when you get into the AMG line, the first thing that you'll notice, of course, is the appearance. The differences between the other models. You've got a unique grille and front fascia up front, vertical slat grille with a big Mercedes logo. And you'll see that in the sculpting of the hood as well. A nice throwback to the 1950s there. Optional on this one is the lighting package, which has projection functions that sends out some nice animations on the walls or in the street ahead of you when you're coming and going. And when you're driving at night, it'll actually throw some light over on the lane next to you when you're changing lanes. Little things like that to not only impress your friends, but to give you a little bit of a safety element as well. Coming around the corner, this does have optional wheels on it. Standard on the AMG are 18-inch wheels. This does have an optional 19 and here an optional 20-inch wheel, which is pretty attractive. I really like the way these look. They have a little bit of class and a little bit of sass. Coming down the side, this has some nice lower rocker sills that give it a lower appearance, but it does sit low, and that's because we have the lowered Mercedes-AMG suspension, and we'll talk in more detail about that here in just a moment. On the roof, you can see that this has the optional panoramic roof, which does have an opening front panel and a nice blackout appearance too. On the rear deck is a very subtle lip spoiler. They didn't really get over the top. Just below that, some very sleek and slender OLED taillights. Now, when I say OLED, that means they've got a lot of design element to them. They're animated, and there's just a lot of detail that you can see when you look close in there. Down in the lower bumper, a nice sporty gloss black splitter design element, and it's bookended by dual exhaust finishers on either side. Very sexy, I'd say. And compared to C-Classes of just the last generation or so, I think this has got a nice, sexy stance to it. And it's definitely more of a premium vehicle now than it used to be, say, 10 or 20 years ago. Whenever I test a car, there's a part of that car that is my favorite thing about it. And on this car, well, it's the interior. I mean, just look at how rich and beautiful this is. And being a little bit old school, I really believe that wood and leather and rich colors should be part of the interior on a Mercedes-Benz. It's how I was brought up around them, and when I get one like this that has this texture palette, this color palette, I am thrilled to no end. I feel at home here. It's beautiful. Can you tell I like it? But this is a very well crafted interior. There is soft stitching on the dash, beautiful accent stitching that ties in with the seats. We have Napa leather here in two different colors, beautiful wood with inlay, and it's a little bit of a matte finish. There's some texture on it, not the shiny burl wood we've seen maybe 20, 30 years ago, but it's very contemporary, and I just think it looks great. Now, granted, if this is not your flavor, you can get this any number of ways with carbon fiber, metal looking trims. There's a lot of choices, trust me. Being in the AMG model, this has some beautifully crafted sport seats. They hold you well. They are very comfortable. You have adjustments over here. There's a lumbar adjustment on the side, and this also has the dynamic settings in the center stack that allow you to have some sort of a massage feature. These aren't the full massage seat, but they have, with the air bladders in them, some sort of an animatronic massage feature that moves around. And and keeps you alert maybe. They are heated. The only drawback is in this price range, they're not ventilated. The steering wheel ahead of me has some wonderful magnesium paddle shifters on it. They feel of quality. They're cold to the touch. They're probably hot in the summer too. Nice touch controls here, thumb controls on that steering wheel that allow you to do a number of things with the driving dynamics, drive modes, etc. And they're touch sensitive. They're little round screens. I think they're cool. Ahead of me is a big 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, and it is very, very, very customizable. You can get in on the steering wheel touch controls, and you can put any number of different designs on this. This has several to choose from, and a number of different layouts aside the designs. And so you can really dial this in the way you want it, whether it be space age forward or classic Mercedes. And so I like that. And then of course in the center of those you can also choose what you want to have in terms of content. And over here an 11.9-inch portrait style center stack screen and piano black trim in the center console on this one. As you look around, you can see that there's ambient lighting in here, and that is infinitely customizable. You can get into the center stack screen and you can adjust the lighting. It can be animated, it can be cycling, it can be a solid color, and you can have two different colors. Lots of different ways to go. I love it, and it's everywhere too. At night you can especially see it. It outlines just about everything. It is an option though. Keep that in mind. A lot of things here I'm talking about are optional, I'm afraid. Now, when it comes to versatility and storage, inside this console, there is a place for your phone. You can slide that down in there, and it is a wireless charger, an option, but you can also set it to the side. I typically like to have my phone visible to the glance, so if something lights up and I need to know what it is while I'm driving, I can just look down and see. When they're hidden away down inside of a hole, it's not my favorite situation. Cup holders down here, lots of USB ports, and incidentally I'll point out that this has the USB package, which gives you additional USB capability and option. Down inside the center console, not quite the size of a rectangular tissue box, but as far as cubic centimeters, cubic inches, it's probably in the same category, and also more USB down inside there. Above me is the aforementioned panoramic roof, another option, but a pretty nice one in this car. It really opens this interior up and makes it quite comfortable. The rear seat of this C-Class has been a place that has actually impressed me the last couple of times I've tested it. For what is generally a mid-size sedan, it has some pretty good space, and even though this does have a low sedan-like seating position, it's comfortable, and that's because these seats are very supportive on the sides. They have a great shape. So even though you're sitting down in them, you don't feel like you're in a bucket. And these seats ahead of me are set for my height, which is about 5'8", 5'9", depending on what I'm wearing for shoes. And you can see I've got about 4 inches of room ahead of my knees, so I could have a very tall person here and I would not be cramped. And so it's a good space. Headroom is good, even with the panoramic roof that's above me. There is space for a third passenger here in the middle, although it's you know, sitting on the hump, it would be not the most comfortable place. But amenities back here, looking at the back of the console, you can see we do of course have vents. I would expect that. Also, the climate control system, you have your own zone back here for the rear passengers. They can set it, turn it off, make it however they want. They can even individualize it right to left. What's not back here, and honestly to my surprise, for this price range, we don't have heated seats in the back. There are a lot of cars that, you know, offer that in this price range. The other thing is here on this fold down armrest, while it's quite comfortable, there's no cup holders in it. It has a pop out for putting a tablet or some other device here, but there's no cup holders in the back seat. A 72K, a little bit of a surprise. So it's probably obvious that I'm very much impressed with this interior. The craftsmanship is exquisite. The fit and finish is exquisite. It's beautiful to look at. It's comfortable. But I have to tell you though, at $72,000, I think it's missing a few things. I test cars at $30,000 or $40,000, for instance, that have heated and ventilated seats. I drive cars in that price range that also have heated seats in the back, not to mention cup holders back there. So while this is very well done, and almost every Mercedes I've ever been in the last 5 to 7 years has just knocked my socks off, this one is just missing a couple of things. So this interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is an 11.9-inch portrait style touchscreen. And when you look at the pictures, it looks like it's very much symmetrical, this dash design and layout. But if you look closely, it actually tilts and cants toward the driver. It's a little bit of a trick design-wise, and you don't notice it unless you sit in the back seat and look at it square on, but it does help the driver actually use it and have a better view and a little bit less glare. I absolutely love this system. I'll just be right up front with it. Almost all of these latest, greatest MBUX Mercedes systems just work well. They've got beautiful graphics, the touch, the use, the layout of the menus, everything is spot on. Fully featured Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, it's wireless, satellite radio, HD radio, full cloud connected everything, and it also has a great voice activated navigation system. Now granted, a lot of these things I'm talking about are an option. The Burmester sound system is an option. A lot of the feature content here is an option, and they're expensive, but when you put it all in here, it really works good. There is a 360-degree surround monitor that is absolutely amazing, and you can set it to be sort of more sensitive or less sensitive. When it detects that there's obstacles around you, for instance, it will pop up and go, hello, look at this. And you can also set it to show you forward view sitting at a stoplight, for instance. I've turned that off because I find it distracting, but there are so many ways that you can set it to have it the way you want it. And that's what I like. I don't like it sometimes when these car companies, they give you all of this stuff, but you can't turn it off. Maybe it's more than you want. Mercedes gives you the option of being smart enough to have a preference, and so I kind of appreciate that. You can also get into the performance related settings around drive modes. You can set the suspension, you can set the engine and transmission all separately if you want to have your individualized dynamic drive modes. There's just way too much to list here. The bottom line is the radio sounds really great. I mean, this Burmester audio is amazing, even on satellite radio. It works good, it's easy to use, and there's really nothing here that it doesn't have. This system gets 5 out of 5 stars. What's under the hood here is very special. This is a hand-built 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo. M139L is the code name, and L is for longitudinal mount. Most of the vehicles this engine or variations of it have been transverse mount and front-wheel drive based vehicles. So here in the C-Class, it is front to rear. 402 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. It has a 9-speed speed shift multi-clutch automatic transmission. This is also a mild hybrid with a 48-volt system. It has a belt-driven starter generator motor that can offer an additional 13 horsepower. It can also charge the battery on coast and other situations. There's also a glide feature. But what's most interesting about what's going on here is this turbocharger, the first production presentation of an electric exhaust gas turbocharger that has a 48-volt electric motor between the exhaust and the intake impellers, which can spin this up to 175,000 RPM. That gives you instantaneous boost even at startup, at low RPM, and when you've been coasting. When you mash the pedal, you don't have to wait for the exhaust to give it boost. It's there. So Mercedes-Benz wants me to make sure I tell everybody this is from the Petronas Formula One racing team, their technology. They want you to know that that's what you're paying for when you step up to the AMG. It's marketing lingo, but it's pretty cool. All right, my friends, are we ready to take a drive? Finally, after all my jawboning about the car. So if you do watch my videos, you know the first question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a single soul around. And go. Nice sound. And 60. Woo, you hear that? Woo. All right, so like the SL43 I just tested last week, you'll notice when I put the hammer down and we took off, there wasn't a lot of drama. There was a bit of a delay, actually. It kind of rolls into an acceleration very softly. So if this thing would just light the tires up and give you throttle the second you step on it, why, it might be a little bit quicker. Though, Mercedes-Benz does tell us this goes 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, which is still quite fast, and it is, and it does feel like it. It's got a wonderful sound, you heard that. And with the active exhaust that this has, that sound gets louder or it gets quieter depending on the drive mode that you set it on. So obviously comfort, quiet, sport, sport plus, it gets louder and louder. And it has that nice blat when you get shifts. Yeah, hear that? Wow. I think a lot of that's coming out of the subwoofer too. It could be, but it does sound very cool. So this engine, as you might have just noticed, is mated to a 9-speed direct shift multi-clutch transmission. So it really is more like a robotic manual than it is a traditional automatic. It's got a wet clutch instead of a torque converter. So those shifts, you feel them like this has got a regular clutch. It's got other clutches inside. The paddle shifters give you immediate shifts. Bang, bang, bang. It's there like you want it. This does have the chops when it comes to performance in that way. And it sounds great. It feels great. 402 horsepower, and the turbo lag, very, very low, if even noticeable. Now, granted, what we noticed at the takeoff back there isn't really turbo lag. That's electronic throttle and computer lag that keeps this thing from polluting too much or using too much gas to meet all the regs. But all of that said, this is a nice little motor. The problem is, and we again discussed this when we tested the SL43 last week, it is a very high-strung 4-cylinder turbo. It is not the most refined engine in the Mercedes-Benz bin, okay? Not a 6-cylinder, not smooth and refined. This is a performance engine, which is great if that's what you want, but know you're getting it when you buy this car because it has the personality of a 4-cylinder engine, which for this Mercedes, I wouldn't say aficionado. I'm a bit of an enthusiast. I love them. It seems a little out of place in some of their cars. The lower, cheaper ones, not so much. This is a car that it's acceptable in. The SL43, I thought it was completely didn't belong there. But in this packaging, not too bad. Efficiency, very good. This has a mild hybrid system. And so because of that, with the extra boost from the electric motor and all of that, this can be very efficient. The EPA rates it at 19 city, 26 highway, and 22 mpg combined, and that's about what I got with it this week, 22 mpg. Not bad for a car with 400 plus horsepower in any day of the week. So it's a wonderful motor, it's a fun motor. I haven't gotten my head around it in a Mercedes-Benz, but it's here. And if you don't like it, you can get more refined, more powerful motors all the way up to V8 time. So overall, this powertrain could be more refined, but it's got plenty of power, it's got plenty of fun, and if this is what you want, it's going to make you happy. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. The chassis on the C-Class has come a long way since the first generations, and like the one I owned nearly 20 years ago. Today, we've got a multi-link front suspension and a multi-link rear suspension. That is pretty heady stuff on any car, let alone something that's pretty far down in the scale of the product lines. This has the AMG adaptive dampers, which are tied to all of the drive modes. And among those, there are the modes for the slippery situations, but we have Comfort, which gives you the softer ride. We have Sport and Sport Plus, which give you a firmer and more aggressive ride. And so you can toss this into a corner, and with these big wheels and low profile tires, this thing has got grip to spare. So first thing I always like to talk about is the ride. Well, it's got a Mercedes feel to it, which if you've been around Mercedes-Benz vehicles, that means that they have a little bit of a float, a little bit of a cushiness, and they're not always directly dialed in for performance, even the AMG models, and that is true here. This still has a Mercedes-Benz feel, even when you've got it dialed up to its stiffest setting. On Comfort, I gotta tell you, this is like driving a Marshmallow, only this Marshmallow's got low profile tires and big wheels, so you get a little bit of harshness and a little bit of softness. When you dial it up to Sport and Sport Plus, you do get a more aggressive drive and ride experience that you'd expect, something that you could even take to the track, I dare say, but you still have a little bit of float and bounce. And that's really my only complaint about this chassis and the way they've got it tuned, is that they've just left a little bit of that bounce and float in here that I actually had to turn off the HUD this week, the display on the windshield, because this thing bobs and bounces so much regardless of what setting that you have it on, that display was bouncing up and down in front of my eyes relative to the horizon and everything, and it was kind of making me seasick. I had to turn the darn thing off. So it's comfortable, it handles well, but they're just trying to sort of be two things at the same time, regardless of the setting you put it on. If they would have at least given me the turn off, the bounce and float, even on the stiffest settings, it'd be perfect. The good news is the fact that it's a very precise suspension and steering. This has a variable ratio steering rack, which not only has a variable ratio, but it has variable assist. So depending on your speed, it can be heavier or lighter. Lighter at slow speeds, heavier at high speeds. This has all-wheel steering, standard. The rear axle can turn opposite to your front wheels under 37 miles per hour, so it really tightens the turning circle, makes parking this thing a breeze. I was able to parallel park this thing multiple times this week in a really tight spot, no problem at all, and I didn't curb the wheels. And when you get up to speed above 37 miles an hour, those wheels can turn parallel, giving you more stability when you're doing things like lane changes. And four-wheel steering's been around for quite a while, but now it's coming down to, well, it's not exactly the blue-collar level, but we're getting further down the scale where it's easier to afford and have in your vehicles. Now, out on the highway, this feels like a Mercedes-Benz. It is solid as a brick. That's what you pay for. It's not the quietest one, though, that I've had. 70-mile-an-hour test with the decibels, 61.5 decibels. That's actually average for almost all the cars we test. Some of the Mercedes-Benzes I've tested in the last year or so have been down in the 50s. Very good, but 61.5 is nothing to brag about. I would give that to two things. We've got the high-performance engine, we've got the high-performance tires, and this does not have the optional sound package that Mercedes-Benz offers, where you can get the acoustic extras that actually give you a quieter ride. That's probably a lot more money than what we've already spent on this car. So I guess my takeaway in the ride, drive, and handling is that if you like Mercedes-Benz and the traditional Mercedes-Benz ride, this is still a Mercedes-Benz. But in their quest to give us a performance car, they didn't go all the way. They didn't tune out what really belongs in a comfortable luxury car. And it's just really it's the balance of it. I'm really getting into the weeds on little things, but these are just the things I notice. So this chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, we've driven it. We've had a good look at it inside and out. You see me smile just a little bit, and you see me kind of complain once or twice, but let's talk about the value equation. And the first thing I always like to get on the table is the fact that this is not a Corolla, okay? You're not measuring this on a spreadsheet going, am I getting all of the features for the money that the BMW offers and that the Infiniti offers, or that the Lexus. People, when you buy a car like this, you don't do that, right? You love a Mercedes-Benz, you drive the car, you love it, you want it because of whatever it's got. You don't care what it costs, and that's good because it's a lot of money, $72,000 for a C-Class. And you can spend more. This has a lot of options on it, to be fair, and really the component that makes that price what it is the fact that the German brands typically charge a lot for their options. $1,750 for metallic white paint. That's pretty rich, if you ask me. And some of the other options, you've seen the pricing go across your screen as we've talked about these things. But alas, you're spending up for a car that certainly isn't a base model C-Class Mercedes. There's a lot of stuff here, and yes, you could even go further down the road. There's a lot more money to spend on this car if you go into the higher models, but where this one's at, $72K. Is it a good value? Well, honestly, when I look at things like warranty coverage, 4 years, 50,000 miles, that's actually not bad. It's more than some of the lower brands, but it's not as much as you can get. When I look at quality, for the most part, Mercedes-Benz is great, but I did notice a few little rattles and creaks on the interior during my week with it, which I think is out of place in any car, let alone one that costs this much. And when I look at just what they're charging for options, those all calculate into 4 out of 5 stars for a value score. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4 out of 5 stars for the review. I think the big takeaway for me for this car is the fact that as someone who's owned a C-Class before, I would tell you that it's come a long way. It's no longer sort of at the bottom of the Mercedes-Benz product line like when it was when I purchased one. This is a car that's really equivalent to almost an E-Class or maybe an S-Class of 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, it's larger, it's got all of the tech, it's got it's got stuff on it that even the S-Class would never have thought of having 20 years ago. I mean, that's just how the world progresses. So there's a lot of car here for the money, but it's very, very specific for a high performance customer. We talked about that with the powertrain and the chassis. So this has got a very narrow audience, and if you're that audience, you're probably going, hell yes, I'll take it. And that's where I'm at with this car. So if you enjoyed our review, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. We do a lot of these, or you can just simply see our latest video right there if you're not quite ready to commit. Either way, stay tuned.